Hello there and welcome back. In the previous episode, we added a few features related to the inventory system. So right now we have this option to remove items. So when we pick up an item, we can drag it into this trash can and then delete it. We can also hover over this item and we will see some information about it. And we can also consume an item when we right click on it and it will refill our bars. So that's what we did in the previous episode. In this episode, we're going to start working on a big feature, and it will be an option to equip our tools. So we're going to have quick slots on the UI, like many other survival games have, and we're going to be able to drag items from our inventory into these quick slots. And then when inside these quick slots, we're going to be able to click on the number keys 1, 2, 3, 4 and select these tools. And when selected, they're going to appear inside our hand. So for example, if we drag the axe into the first slot, then we can press on 1 and then the axe will be in our hands and we can use it. So it's very standard for many other survival games. Before we start working on this big feature that will probably take a few episodes to complete, I want to do a few things. First of all, you probably noticed that there are a few changes to the UI. For example, the status bars look a bit different, and I changed this to be a circle, and there's also a few different changes to the other UIs. For example, this pickup alert and this deletion alert. So all of these things that I change are simply UI changes and they don't have any effect on the code. So I just want to let you know so you won't think that I'm changing things without telling you or that you skipped some episode. Okay? You will have your own UI in your game that will look differently. So this series is not about how to design UI, and I'm definitely not a designer. I'm doing very simple things and sometimes I'm changing the UI to make it look a bit better, okay? Before we start working on the feature, there's a few changes in the code that I want to do because these are things that just bother me and you probably noticed them if you're played around with the game. So if we run the game and we go next to some item, and then when we open our inventory, we can still select this item and it will show this hand and this stick, and if we click on the stick it will appear in our inventory. And also if we select an item and then open the inventory, it will still be selected. So these are things that we don't want to happen. When we open the inventory or any menu, we don't want to be able to interact with items, okay? So we want to change this in our code. We want to fix this. These are small things, but maybe some of you notice them and I want to fix them, okay? And to show you how we fix things like that. So we're going to click on the scripts folder and we're going to go inside our inventory system script, okay? Inside our inventory system, we will go to the start method and we're going to add a line of code that has nothing to do with the problem that I talked about, but it's also going to fix a different problem. So we're going to type in cursor, visible, and true. It's something that we may not notice right now when we play the game, when we run it from our Unity editor, but if we build the game, it will show the cursor even if we did not open a menu. Actually false, right? We want to make it invisible when we start the game. Only when we open a menu, we want the cursor to be visible. So inside the update, when we open the inventory, okay, we want to make the cursor visible. Cursor visible true. And then when we close the inventory, we want to make it invisible again. Okay? So we're going to do the same thing inside our crafting system because we can also open a crafting panel, okay? So inside the crafting system, we don't need to make it visible at start because it will simply do it inside the inventory system. But in the crafting system, we're going to go to the update and we're going to add cursor visible true and cursor visible false. Okay, so when we open, we're going to see our cursor, and when we close the inventory or the crafting panel, we are not going to see the cursor. And it's something we did not notice up until now because we're simply running the game inside the editor and some things are working differently. But I tried to actually build and run the game, so it means I created an actual executable file and I run the game. So you can also play around with it, but just know that because the game is still not finished, some things will not work as they're working inside the editor, okay? Now, another thing we want to take care of is the thing that I talked about picking up items when our menus are open. So inside the inventory system, after this part, we're going to type selection manager instance, and we're going to create a method inside the selection manager that will be called disable selection. So we're simply going to hide all of the UI that is not supposed to be shown when we're inside the selection manager. For example, we don't want to show this selection dot, right? This little point in the middle of the screen. But because right now, if we open our inventory, this dot still appears and we don't want to see it. And of course, we also want to make the hand disappear and we want to make selection impossible, right? We don't want to select items. So we're going to take care of all of these things inside this disable selection method. Disable selection. And we're going to create it. Then we're going to reference the selection manager again. But this time we're going to get the component, the script itself. So we're going to get the selection manager script itself. And we're simply going to disable it, okay? Because when our menu is open, we don't want the selection manager to work. And this will prevent us from selecting and picking up items when the menus are opened. And then when we close the menu, we want to do the opposite. We're going to create a method called enable selection, and we're going to enable the selection manager script. Then we're going to copy this and do the same thing inside the inventory system. Okay, and we're going to save this, we're going to save this, and now we're going to go into the selection manager, and at the bottom of the script, we're going to add both of these methods, public void disable selection. So now we're going to create the enable selection, enable selection. And inside the disable selection, we're simply going to make our hand icon disabled, right? We have a reference to the hand icon over here, and we have a reference to the center dot over here, and we also have a reference to the selected object and this interaction info UI. So this is a good place to disable them all. Center.image false, interaction info UI, set active false. And we also want to deselect. If we selected an object, we want to make it null, right? Because if we were pointing at an object and then we open the menu, this object will still be selected. And then when we click on something, it will just pick it up, okay? So we also want to make the selected object null. And then when we enable a selection, we're simply going to reverse it, right? We're going to copy this and make it all true. And there is no need to touch the selected object again because it will simply stay null, and then when we select a new object, it will get filled, okay? So those are the things that we need to fix this problem. We're going to save and we're going to go back into our game. And now if we run the game and we go over here, we can see that if we open our menu and we cannot select any item, we cannot pick any item to our inventory. And also if we hover over the item and we open the inventory, it just deselects everything and it hides the UI. So now this problem is fixed and the game will feel a bit more polished, okay? So now we're going to start working on our next big feature, okay? We're going to create quick slots over here, and we're going to be able to drag items from the inventory or simply click on items from the inventory and they will appear inside these quick slots. And then when we press on one of the numbers, it will select these items, okay? So it will take a few episodes because first we need to create the UI, then we need to be able to transfer these items into the quick slots, and later we're going to deal with actually having a model of these tools inside our hands and using these tools. So it's a lot of logic, a lot of different things that we need to take care of. And let's start. So this quick slot UI and this entire system will be very much like our inventory system, okay? It will look almost the same code-wise. It will just work a bit differently. And the UI will simply stay on the screen the entire time. We're not going to trigger it to appear and disappear. It will always stay on the screen. Okay, so we're going to create an object inside our canvas and we're going to call it quick slots panel. Okay, and then we're going to go inside our inventory screen and we're going to select the first 7 slots. Okay, so I'm simply clicking on the first one, I'm holding select, and then I'm clicking on the 7th one, okay? And then we're going to copy and paste it inside the quick slots panel. So now if we click on this quick slots panel and we zoom out, we're going to see this entire panel over here, but we can also see these slots. So we're going to select these slots, okay? And we're going to change the position over here, the Y position, to -423, okay? And, well, actually, maybe it's not... Okay, yeah, this is the Y. I think it's at the bottom of the screen. Let's see over here. And we can move it to the middle. So we're going to place it over here, something like that. Again, these are not exact positions for your game. Maybe you want to place it in a different spot, but usually in survival games, it appears at the bottom of the screen over here, okay? So let's just make sure that we're in the middle, and we can always fix that later, okay? So now we can zoom in a bit, and we can also remove this. So we're simply going to select all of these slots. We're going to click on this source image and we're going to put inside a border with a background, okay? Because we want the background to always be at the back, so we don't want to create another game object inside that will hold the background, because then we need to always check that we have more than one item. So we want to make these slots empty, okay? We only want to have the tool inside of these slots. So we don't want to also have an item that will hold the background or something like that. So we're going to just have an image with a background and a frame, okay? And again, in your game, it will be different, but this is the way we're going to do it. So I'm going to click on this source image, okay? And I have this thing here called frame with border. And then all of our slots will have a frame and a background, and it will all sit inside this image component, okay? So we don't want to create an extra object over here that will hold the background or hold the frame image, okay? Otherwise, we need to always check that we have more than one item, okay? Now we're going to rename these slots and call them quick slots, okay? So quick slot 1, let's copy this and just paste it in all of them. Because they're not slots, they're quick slots. So we always want to name the objects properly so we don't get confused. Rename. And we're only going to have 7 of these slots. If you want to have more slots or less slots, you simply need to adjust the code that we're going to write accordingly, okay? But basically we're going to populate a list with all of these children. So if you have less than 7 or more than 7, it will automatically populate the list. So I don't think you have to do a lot of different changes. You simply remove these slots from here or add more slots, okay? But you're going to see the things that you need to change accordingly. Now, another thing that you need to know is that inside of these slots, we have this item slot script, right? Because this item slot script was on these slots. So we don't need to remove it because we're still going to use it, okay? So just make sure that all of these slots have this item slot script, okay? And it's a script that we created when we first created the inventory system. So now inside these quick slots, we're going to create an object and call it number. But don't worry, we're not going to leave this object inside. Number. And we're going to add an image component to this item. And the image will be something that I have here around this one, okay? So it's just going to store the number of the slot, okay? Then I'm going to just change the dimension. So it will be something about 36 on 36. And I'm going to position it 37 on 37. Okay, so it's simply going to be at the top right corner, okay? So it's not going to be in the way of the item, so we're going to see the item, but it's also going to be over here. So now we're going to copy this and we're going to paste it inside all of the other slots. So now each slot has this number object, okay? But you can see that they're all in the same position because we simply copied this object. So we go to this number and we change the position to be 37. And then we click on this number and we change the position to be 37. Because this 37 is relative to this parent, okay? To the quick slot parent. So number 37, 37, 37. And I really don't like to use exact numbers because in your case it's going to be different, okay? You just want to make them all look the same. Okay. Now inside all of these numbers, we're going to create a new game object. Well, it's actually going to be a UI text, okay? So we're going to create a text and we're going to double click on it and we're going to position it exactly to fit the parent, okay? And we're going to change this first one to 1. We're going to place it in the middle. We're going to change the font a bit, something like 22. We're going to make it bold. We're going to give it our custom font. And we're going to change the color to 80, 80, 80, okay? So it's going to be gray, but when we select this number, it's going to change colors, okay? And then we're going to do the same thing. We're going to copy this text and we're going to paste it inside this number. Just make sure that it's actually inside this number. And then we need to simply click on all of these text and change the position to 0, okay? So then it will be exactly at the 0, 0 position. And all we need to do right now is just change the text to 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, okay? So I think it looks pretty good, okay? But now the problem is that we really don't want these objects to be inside the quick slots. Because you remember in the inventory screen, inside the system, we always checked if we have an object inside our slot. So we checked if we have more than 0 items, it means that the slot is full, and we did all kinds of things. So we only want to have one item inside the slot, and the item will be the actual item that we keep inside the slot. We don't want any other extra objects inside these slots. So what we're going to do is inside this quick slot panel parent, okay? And I think that, let's see, I think that all of these slots are not inside the parent. So let's select all of this. Let's close them. And just select all of them and place them inside this quick slot panel. Okay, so now they're children of this quick slot panel. And inside this quick slots panel, we're going to create a new game object and we're going to call it numbers holder. And then we're going to select all of these numbers, okay? And to do that, you can simply press on Control. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then we're simply going to drag it inside this numbers holder. Okay? So now in the UI, everything looks the same, but inside this hierarchy, we have nothing inside these slots, and it's good because then we're going to be able to check if we have something inside. And of course, the only thing that we want to store inside the slot is the tool that we're going to equip, okay? And also make sure that this numbers holder is at the end of the list, okay? Because we want this number to be in front of the tool, right? If we have an image of a tool over here, we want it to be behind this number, but in front of the background. So if you place this numbers holder at the top, then the image, the sprite of our tool will be in front of this number. Okay, so just make sure. Okay, so now we're pretty much done with the UI, okay? And next we want to take care of the code. So we're going to create an equip system. So it's going to be a singleton, and we're going to be able to reference things from it. So we're going to click on System, Create Object, and we're going to name it Equip System, okay? We can also call it Quick Slot System, but I think it's better to call it Equip System because it's going to deal with equipping the item. So we're going to place all kinds of methods inside that are not just related to the quick slots. So now inside this Equip System, we're going to place a script that I already created, and we're just going to go over it, and I'm going to explain to you what is going on. And of course, I'm also going to provide it to you with a link, okay? So I have it over here, Equip System, and we're simply going to drag the script on this Equip System object, okay? And of course, we're going to understand what happens inside. but we can see that there is some kind of reference that is needed over here, so we can already do that, so we won't forget later. So it simply wants this quick slots panel reference, so we're going to drag this quick slots panel over here, and that's it for now. So let's go inside our equip system script. First of all, we make it into a singleton. We of course have the awake method that makes it a singleton. Then we have some references to the UI. We have this quick slots panel reference. And we created both of these lists. So a lot of things here will really resemble the inventory system, okay? So inside the inventory system, we also had both of these lists, and we had populate slot list, and we had check if full and find next empty slot. So all of these things will also be used inside the equip system. Okay, populate slot lists, check if full, find empty slot. So these methods are almost the same. Okay, we only changed a few things like the number of slots. Okay, so this is one thing you need to change if you want to add more or less slots. In the inventory system, we had 21, right? But over here we have 7. But we're going to get to that. So we have both of these lists. One list will hold all the game object, which will be the actual slots, okay? These slots. And the second list will hold the names of the items that are inside of these slots, okay? And it's the same way we worked with the inventory system. Then inside the start method, we're going to call a method that is called populate slot lists. And inside of this method, we're simply going to loop over each child of this quick slots panel. Okay, so we're going to go over all of these children, and we're going to add these children into this list. Okay, so this list will hold all of these children, so we're simply going to go over all of these children and add them to this list, okay? And over here we check if these objects have this tag, quick slot tag, right? Because this thing, for example, is not a slot, so we don't want to include it inside the list. So we're going to create a new tag, okay? We're going to go to the tag, add tag, and we're going to create a new tag called quick slot. Okay, and then we're going to select all of these slots. We don't want to select this numbers holder, and we're going to add this quick slot tag to them. Okay, so over here we simply check if these objects have a quick slot tag, and if they have, they simply add them into this list. Okay, then we have a method that simply adds items into these quick slots, okay? So like we had this add to inventory method, right? That we added things into our inventory. Now we want to add things into our quick slot lists. So this is some kind of small inventory, right? It's almost the same. Now, inside this list, we first of all find the next empty slot, right? Because if one of these slots is occupied, we want to find the next slot. So if we click on an item inside our inventory, we want it to appear over here. But we want it to appear over here in some kind of order. So we don't want it to just appear inside number 4. If we click on it, we want it to appear in number 1, and then number 2, and then number 3. So we check if the first one is occupied, it's going to go over here. If both of these are occupied, it's going to go to the third one. We're also going to have the option to drag items into different slots, right? Maybe we want to change the position. We want the axe to be over here, and the pickaxe to be over here, and the chainsaw to be over here. And yes, we're going to have chainsaws. So first of all, we need to check what is the next empty slot. And this is when we click on an item, because we're going to have two different ways to equip items. By clicking on them and by dragging them. Okay, so let's just open the inventory screen so it will be. So a first way to equip tools over here, it's going to be to drag the items, okay? Click and drag the items. So we can drag them wherever we want, okay? The other way is going to right click on these items, and then they're simply going to appear inside this quick slot, okay? And this is something that exists in a lot of games. I'm not inventing something new. So first of all, we look for an empty slot, okay? And when we find this empty slot, we're going to put it inside this variable. So this method over here simply loops over all the items inside this quick slots list. And if it's not occupied, right, it's going to return this slot, okay? So it's going to return a game object, and we're going to receive this game object over here, and we're going to place it over here. So if the first slot doesn't have anything inside, it means that it's empty. So it's going to return this game object slot. And because this method returns a game object, we're going to receive a game object over here, and we're going to store it inside this variable, okay? And inside this method, we're always going to receive an item to equip, okay? Because we want to equip some item. So if we received an axe over here, we're going to get this axe, and we're going to change the parent of this axe, right? We're going to change the transform, because if this axe was inside this slot 1 of the inventory system, and then we dragged it over here, we want to change the parent of this item. So it's no longer going to be slot 1, but it's going to be quick slot 1, okay? So over here, we change the parent of this item to be this empty slot, right? The slot that we got over here. And there's also some kind of boolean that tells us world position stays. So we don't want to keep the same world position, so we say false, right? Because if we said true and we changed this item to be the child of this item, then it would still be in this position, but it will appear inside this new parent, okay? So the position would stay and we will still see it inside the inventory system, but we really want to see it inside the quick slot, right? So that's why we say false. Next, we also want to get the name of the item. So we make this little parsing, we remove the clone, and then we get the clean name, and we add the clean name to the list. So we have this list that tracks all the items that are inside our quick slots, and it's a list of strings, okay? And then we recalculate the list from the inventory system, because we always do that when we add things into the inventory or when we remove things from the inventory. So when we remove this item into the quick slot, we need to recalculate the list so the inventory system will know that it has an empty slot and that this item doesn't exist inside, okay? And if you're wondering why we're not also doing the crafting system refresh list method, is because tools are not going to be craftable, right? So we're only going to equip tools. So we don't care if the crafting system knows about it or not. Maybe later we're going to have things that we can equip and also use as crafting materials. Then yes, we're going to have to recalculate the crafting system list. But for now, we don't need to do it because it doesn't make any sense. So we covered this method, and the next method is check if full. So it's exactly the same method we had in the inventory system. It simply checks if our slot list is full, because if it's full, then we won't be able to add more items. And we're going to call this method from other places. That's why it's public, and this method is private because we're simply going to use it inside this class, but this one we're going to use it outside, okay? We're going to check if the quick slot is full when we actually try to add an item into the quick slot. So it goes over the quick slots, it checks if it has more than 0 things, it means that there is nothing inside, and then it always adds 1 to the counter, And if it's 7, it means that all of the slots are full, and then it will return true. It means that it's full. If it's not going to reach 7, it means that our quick slots bar is not full, and then it's going to return false. So we're going to get a Boolean out of this check, okay, out of this method. And we're going to use this later, and you're going to see when. So this is pretty much this entire equip system script. Again, you're going to find a link to all of this code in the description section of this video, so you don't have to copy everything. Sometimes I prefer to write things with you. Other times I don't want to waste time on it, so I'm just giving you this entire code. We're going to add more things into this code, okay? Even in this episode, but all of this code you're going to get at the beginning. So now we can't actually drag or click on items to appear over here because we still need to configure a few things and add a few things to the code, okay? So we want to create all kinds of states to say that these items, for example, the axe, right? The axe, we want it to be equipable, or to just make sure that this item can go into these quick slots, because we don't want to be able to drag a stick into this quick slot, right? We only want to be able to drag certain items. Okay, so the same way inside our tools and inside every item, we have this inventory item script. We have all kinds of different states. Is trashable, is consumable, okay? All of these booleans. So we're going to add a few more booleans that will track if this item is equipable, okay? And then we're going to be able to know that when we click on this item, if this item is equipable, then it's going to appear over here. So we're going to have all of these little checks. So let's go back into our inventory item, okay? And over here, we're going to add a few more properties. So I'm going to paste them. So we're going to have a bool that will keep track of if this item is equipable, if we can drop him into the quick slots. Then we're going to have a bool that will keep track if our item is now inside an item slot. And we're going to have a game object reference that will hold the item that we clicked on, right? And we wait for the item to appear in the quick slots. So it's something we need to do, and we're going to see why we need this, okay? Then we're going to go to this on pointer down method. And if you remember, this method comes with this interface on pointer down, and it means that when we click on an item, this code will run, okay? So because we want to right click on an item inside our inventory, and when we right click on this item, we want it to appear in the quick slots, right? So we're going to do it over here. We did the same thing with consuming the item. So now we're going to do it with equipping the item. So we're going to create an if statement. And inside we're going to check if this item is equipable and is now equipped false, right? Because if it's already equipped, we don't want to equip it again. Otherwise, we're going to be able to click on it while it's inside the quick slots, and then strange things will happen. So we don't want to click on it when it's already equipped. And we also check if the quick slots list is not full, right? So we go to the equip system instance, check if full method, and we make sure that it's not full, right? So this is this method that we had over here. Simply check if the quick slot list is not full. So if all of this is true, it means that we can actually make our item appear in the quick slots. So then we're going to reference equip system, add to quick slots, right? and we pass in the game object. And this game object is this game object, right? The game object that this script is on. And we also change it to is now equipped, true, right? Because right now the item is equipped. So let's save this. Now we need to do some change inside the item slot script, because we also want to make this item not equipped when we drag it back into our inventory, right? Think about it. If this item is over here, so the item is equipped, but when we drag it back to the inventory, we want to make it equipped false, right? So we're going to do that inside the item slot, and the item slot is inside all of these slots and also these slots. So we can check if this item is dropped over here, it means that it's no longer equipped. Inside this onDrop method, right? Because when we drop something on this slot, we put it over here. So if the slot is not full, then we do this. If this transform is not, right? I'm putting this over here, although sometimes you miss this, so I can simply say false, right? So if this transform is not a quick slot, then we get this item that is being dragged. We get this script, okay? And we say that is now equipped is false, okay? Because we need a reference to this item that is being dragged. Because when we take this tool and we drag it and drop it over here, while it's being dragged, it's referenced inside this drag drop script, right? This item being dragged. So then we can go inside the script and change this bool to become false. Because when it was dropped inside the inventory, it will check if this slot is not a quick slot. Now, the next thing we want to do is change these numbers. We want to change the color when we select and when we press on the numbers, right? Later, we're also going to select the actual item when we press on these numbers. But right now, we want to take care of the color. We want to make the selected item change the color to become white, okay? So we're actually going to see what item is selected. Some survival games that I played, you can select items, but you don't have any indication of the selected item. So you actually have to play around and check, wait, what is the selected item? So we do want to make some kind of different color, or maybe some kind of different frame over here. So you can do whatever you want, but we're simply going to change the color of the number. So to do that, we need a reference to this numbers holder, right? Because it contains all of these numbers. So we're going to go inside our equip system, and we're going to create a reference. Public game object numbers holder. We're going to save it. And now we have this reference over here. So we're going to drag this numbers holder item into this reference. Second. What's the problem? Oh, not game manager, game object. Yeah, that's the problem. So, okay, now we have this. We can drag this thing over here. So now we have a reference to this panel, and then we can get references to all of these numbers and change their color, okay? So back inside our equip system, we will go and create an update method, okay? So over here, we can create a void update. And of course, this method is something that comes with Unity. It runs every frame, but you should already know that. Inside, we're going to create some kind of if-else statement to check what is the button that we're pressing, right? Because if we press on number 1, we want to choose this one. If we press on number 2, we're going to choose this one. And just a heads up, it's not going to look nice. You will probably tell me, well, why not use a switch statement, right? But I already tried that, and there is no way to do it with a switch statement because we get the key code in runtime. So to do a switch statement, we need to know what is the value that we want to compare the other cases to. But we only get the key code in runtime when we actually press the key code. So there is no way to make it work with a switch statement. So we have to do a very long if-else statement, and that's the only way to make it work. Okay? So we do if, and then we check if the input get key down key code alpha 1, and alpha 1 is this number 1 on the keyboard, okay? This is the name of the key code in Unity. And then we need to do the same thing for all the 7 different buttons, okay? And that's why I told you that it would be better to do it with a switch statement, but there is no actual way to do it with it. So we have to do else if, right? We need to copy this 7 more times. And I know that it doesn't look good, but there is no other way. So here we simply copy this and we check all the other possibilities. Two, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay? And it basically means that if we press on number 1, we want this text to become white. Okay? So we don't have to write this code 7 times. We can just create one method that will do the same thing, and it will be a generic method that will simply receive the number that we got over here, and will do the same code, but each time it will do it differently. So we're going to create this method. We're going to call it select quick slot. Okay? And inside we're going to pass the number that we pressed on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Okay? And now we're going to create this method over here. Void select quick slot. And this method will receive an int with the number that we're going to pass, right? So if we press on 1, it's going to run this method, but with number 1 passed in. If we're going to press on 2, it's going to run this method, but with number 2 passed in, okay? So inside this method, we want to have a reference to a text, okay? To be changed. And then we have a reference to the numbers holder, right? Because we have a reference over here, numbers holder panel. Well, it's not a panel, it's a game object. Transform, find number, okay? So we simply go inside this numbers holder item, and we're going to find the specific text, okay? So if we pressed on 1, we want to go and find this reference, right? So how we're going to do that? We're simply going to find an object called number, but we're also going to add the number to it, okay? and you're going to see how it's going to work. Let's just finish this line. Transform, find text, right? Because then we want to find the text inside of this number. And then we get the text component out of it, right? We want to get this text component and change it, right? We want to change the color of this text component. So now that we got this component, we're simply going to change the color to color white, okay? Now, when we select this number and we change it to white, we want all other numbers to become gray again, right? Because if we selected 1 and 1 became white, and then we select 2, we want 2 to become white, but we want 1 to become gray again, okay? So over here, before we do that, we also want to loop over all the other numbers and make them gray, okay? For each transform child in numbers folder, transform child, transform find text. So we're going to find all these texts and we're going to get their text component, and we're going to change the color of the text to be color gray, okay? And this gray color is actually this gray color that we set over here, 80, 80, 80, okay? So it's the same gray. This is just a gray that is a part of Unity, and the other one is a custom gray, but it's the same gray. So first of all, we make everyone gray, and then we turn the one we decided into white, okay? Now there's another thing that we want to do. We only want to select slots that have an item inside, right? We don't want to select an empty slot. It doesn't make any sense. Only if a slot has a tool inside, only then we want to be able to select that slot, okay? So we're going to surround all of this. We're going to create an if statement over here. And we're going to copy all of this text over here. So only if check if slot is full, and it's going to be a method that we're going to create, and we're going to pass it this number. So only if this slot, for example, slot number 1 is full, only then we're going to be able to select it, okay, and make it white. Otherwise, we don't want to be able to select this slot. So now we're going to create this method over here, and it's going to return a bool. And it's going to receive an integer as a parameter, slot number. Okay, so we simply check inside if quick slot list in the position of the slot number, and then we check the transform and the child count. Only if it's bigger than 0, it means only if there is something inside of this slot, only then return true, okay? Otherwise, return false. So only if there's something inside of this slot, return true, because it means that this slot is full, okay? So we're going to return a boolean over here, and only if it's true, we're actually going to select it. So only if there's something inside of this slot. And we also need to do -1 because this list starts with 0, right? Every list starts with a 0 as the index, but we start with slot 1, 2, 3, 4, okay? So if we want to select the first slot, we need to decrease 1 from the index. Okay? So now that we do this check, we're going to return true or false. And over here, we're going to be able to know if this slot has a tool inside or not. And only if it has a tool. And if it doesn't have a tool inside, then we're going to be able to select it. Now we want to create a few more properties over here. So we're going to have public int selected number. So we just want to keep track of the number that is selected, and it's going to be -1. And -1, it means that nothing is selected, okay? And we're also going to have a reference, game object selected item. So we want to get a reference to the actual item that is inside of the selected slot. So this is the selected item itself, okay? And now over here, let's see, over here, if it's not full, well, if it's full, but before we do this for each, basically before we change the color, so we can changing the color, okay, so this is for changing the color, but we're going to do it before we change the color. We're going to set the selected number to be this number that we got over here. We're going to set the selected item, and we're going to create another method to receive the selected item, selected item. And we're also going to set the selected item get component inventory item. So we get the inventory item script. And inside we're going to create a new boolean that will track if this item is the selected item, okay? Is selected. So all of these things are still not created, and we're going to set it to true. So first of all, let's create this method over here. It returns us a game object, and it receives the slot number. And of course it should be capitalized again. So we're simply going to return. We're going to go inside the quick slot lists, and then slot number -1, okay? So we go and find the item that is inside this index, okay? And we're going to go to transform, get child, and we're going to get the child that is at the 0 position, because there's only going to be one child each time inside of these slots, one tool, so it's going to be in index 0. And we're going to get the game object. So if we have an axe over here, we're going to get the axe item and we're going to return it over here. So we're going to get the axe over here, and we're going to set it as the selected item. And the selected item is just something that we track inside our equip system. And then also we want to create this boolean. So we go into the inventory item, and over here we're going to add this boolean, public bool is selected, okay? So there's a difference between is now equipped and is selected. Because is now equipped, it means that it's not actually equipped. It just means that it's inside this slot or one of these slots. And is selected means that it's the item that we actually selected, that we pressed on its number, okay? So these are the differences. And is equipable simply means that this item can be equipable, okay? And then we go back into, let's save here. Let's go back into our equip system. And over here, we also want to deselect the item that was selected before, because, for example, we selected the axe, okay? So the axe will become the selected item, but then we select another item, so we want to make the axe not selected anymore, okay? So if selected item is not null, it means something else is selected. Simply go to that selected item, to the game object, get the script, the inventory item script, and change the is selected to false, okay? So it means that the new item will become selected, but before we make the new item selected, we make the previous item not selected, okay? So we can also put a comment. It's good to put comments everywhere because later we may forget, but I'm not doing it and it's not good. Unselect previously selected item. The next thing we want to take care of is if, for example, we have an item inside this slot and we selected this slot, we don't want to be able to drag or click on this item while it's selected, right? We don't want to be able to drag it into the inventory if it's selected. We have to select another item, and only then, when this item is no longer selected, then we can click on it and we can place it back into the inventory, right? So for this, we're going to go back into our equipped system script. Well, actually not here, but inside the inventory item. And we're going to create an update method if we don't have one. No, we don't have one. So let's go over here and create an update method. Okay. And inside this method, we're going to check if this item is selected. Then simply go to this game object and get the drag and drop script and then set it to be disabled, okay? Because if, for example, we have an axe over here, we don't want to be able to drag it while it's selected. So the thing that enables us to drag things is this drag and drop script, right? So we're simply going to go to our game object, which is this game object, and we're going to disable the drag and drop script while this item is selected. And else, it means that if this item is not selected, then we're going to make this drag and drop script enabled, okay? And this drag and drop script only refers to the drag and drop script that is on our item, right? On one of these items, because we also have this inventory item script and also have this drag and drop script. So if this item is selected, we're simply going to disable the drag and drop script. And another thing that we want to do, let's just save this. And let's see where we did it. Let's see, it's now equipped. Let's see. Inventory item is now equipped. We can click on this and go to all the implementations. Not implementations, but references. So we are using it inside the inventory item over here. Yes. So when we click on this item, right, when we right click on this item inside the inventory, it's going to go and be placed inside this quick slot. And at the same time, we also set it to be is now equipped. But we also want it to be equipped when we drag the item, right? So because we have two ways of equipping tools inside this quick slot bar. We can click on it or we can drag it. So we also want to make it equipped, make it is now equipped when we drag the item. So we will go into our item slot And over here on drop, when we actually drop this item, we want to check if this transform compare tag. So if this item that we're dropping, well, not the item, but if this slot that we're dropping it into is a quick slot, then it means that this item is dropped inside a quick slot, right? So we want to make it is now equipped. Drag drop, item being dragged, get component, inventory item is now equipped, true, okay? Because we have two different ways to equip the item and we need to make it actually equipped in both ways. And let's save this. And there's something that I noticed. Where was it? Over here, we did a problem. It's a good thing that we did not run the game because we placed this if outside of this if. And this if checks if we right clicked, okay? So it means that if we're simply going to click on something, it's going to run this code, but we want to run this code only if we right click. So we should take this, cut and paste it inside of this if. Okay. So that's something that would cause us a problem later. Now let's go back to our equip system. And over here, there's one last thing that we need to take care of. And the thing, let's see, the thing is that, let's just close this. If, for example, we have this first item selected, we also want to be able to press 1 again and simply deselect this item, okay? So we don't have to select another item to deselect this item. We can simply press on the same item and then it will deselect this item and then nothing will be selected, right? Sometimes we want to go just bare hands, right? We don't want to have any tool in our hand. So to do that, we can simply press on the selected item and then it will simply unequip the tool and we're just going to stay with our bare hands, okay? So this is what we want to do right now. So to do that, we simply need to create another if statement as usual, and we're going to select all of this code. We're going to control cut it. We're going to create an if statement over here and we're going to paste it inside this if statement. So only if the selected number is not the number that we pass in right now, right? So if the saved number, the selected number, so if 1 was selected and now we press on 2, then we want to select a different number. So do all of this, right? This is a usual case. We select a different slot. But else, right? And else means that we are trying to select the same slot, right? 1 is selected and we press on 1 again. Then the selected number will become -1. And -1 is sort of null, okay? It's basically null. We can also make it 0, but -1 is better to notice that it's something unusual, right? So -1 means null. It means that there is no number that is selected. And we're going to do the same thing like we did here. We're going to unselect the item, okay, the last selected item. And we're also going to make all the numbers gray again, okay? I think it's overkill to just loop over all of these slots and make all of them gray. I think it's better to just find the last selected slot and make it gray, but it's just 7 slots, so it doesn't really matter. So that's also a possible solution. So it seems like a lot of code, but basically if we're selecting a different number, right? If we're selecting a different slot, it's going to run this regular code. If we're trying to select the same slot, then it's going to deselect this item, it's going to deselect this number, and it's going to make all numbers gray, okay? Because nothing is selected at this point. Now, that's basically all for this part of the equipping system. And there's one thing that I want to change. If we go to the inventory item script, I want to change the name of this boolean because it may be confusing that is now equipped is not actually when we equip the tool. It's simply when we equip it into this slot, okay? Is selected is when we equip the tool. So I think that it's better to just change this name, and the way to change this name over here so it will also change it everywhere in the code, we need to do refactor. So we simply right click and then rename, and we can see that everything is selected. So let's just rename it to is inside quick slot. Okay, so it will be easier for us later on. So we track if this item is inside a quick slot or not. Okay, so it also changed it over here. Now let's save this. Let's make sure that everything is saved. Let's go back into the editor. And the last thing that we forgot to do is, remember over here, we passed the numbers. So we search for a number with this number, right? So over here, we forgot to change these to actually be number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, and number 5, and number 6. Wait, is something missing? Oh yeah, this one. Oh, come on. Okay, so now we have all of these slots. So now everything should work. Well, at least all of the things that we did up until now should work. And it's of course just the beginning of the equipping system, because there's a lot of things that we need to check when we do these things. We need to make sure that we can click on it and drag it. And if something is selected, we don't want to drag it. So there's a lot of checks that we need to do, and it takes some time to actually make this feature work. So if we run the game, okay, so now we can go and pick up a stick, maybe another one, and then we can right click on it and it will appear inside the quick slot. We can drag it and change its position inside the quick slots, and we can also just drag it into the quick slots, okay? And then of course we can remove it from the quick slots. So all of these things are working, and if we have two items inside our quick slots, we can press on number 1 and it will select this one, and then we won't be able to move it or drag it, but this one we will be able. But then if we select number 2, it will select this one, so we can move this one. And if we press number 2 again while this one is selected, it will simply deselect this one, okay? And of course, we can also see it inside the inspector. So if we disable this maximize on play and we run, and we go and we pick up a stick, and then we click on this stick, we can see all of these booleans over here. So right now this item is equipable, right? And it's trashable. But now when I right click on this stick, it also is inside quick slot. And then when I press number 1, it's also selected. And then when I press number 1 again, it's no longer selected. And when I drop it over here, it is no longer inside the quick slot. Okay, so all of these things work. Maybe I'm going to find a few more bugs later, and I'm going to let you know. So I actually found a few bugs in our code while recording this episode, So I'm just going to show you how to fix these things. And these are just things that are related to us moving from the inventory to the quick slots. And as I told you, there are a lot of things that we need to take care of. So inside the equip system over here, we want to also make this selected item null, right? First, we make this selected item is selected false, but then we also want to make this reference itself null, okay? So that's something we forgot to do. The next thing is we go over here and there's actually no need for this item list, okay? This list of strings. The reason we created it inside our inventory system is because it was used to let the crafting system know what are the things that we have inside the inventory system. But inside the equip system, there is no need for the crafting system to get involved. So there is no use for this list, right? We only need this quick slots list. So let's remove this. And I hope we are not using it. Yes, we're using it inside this add to quick slot. So we're going to simply remove this part because there is no need for it right now. And another thing that we want to do is when we drop, right? When we right click on an item, it will run this method, add to quick slots. So it will recalculate the list. But when we simply drop this item inside, we also want to recalculate the list because it's no longer inside the inventory system, okay? And we also may want to do it when we drop it back into the inventory system, okay? So these are basically all the bugs that I found. And of course, bugs are things that we find as we write the code, as we check things, as we test our game. So it's always a good idea to just run your game and try to play with the UI, play with the different buttons, and try to see if something is not working properly. It means that maybe you need to adjust your code, okay? And when I'm going to find new bugs, I'm going to tell you. Of course, if you find some bug, you can write it down in the comment section and then I will take a look, because I'm not always going to figure out these bugs. Sometimes these are things that you really need to be in a certain situation to encounter them. So I really want to know if we have other things that we need to fix, okay? So all of the code that we wrote in this episode is working, right? All of this functionality is working. But we still don't have an option to actually see the item inside our hand. So as I told you, it will take a few episodes until we complete this feature. So in the next episode, we're going to start working on the option to actually see the tool inside our hands. So if we select the axe over here, then an axe model will appear inside our hands, okay? And then, of course, later, we're also going to be able to use this axe. So it's a system that will allow us to chop trees or hit enemies with this axe, okay? So that's what we're going to take care of in the next episode. So thank you for watching. Please subscribe and leave a like. It will help me a lot. And if you have any questions, you can ask me in the comment section, and see you next time.